We're going to learn React by creating a Kanban board. You can click and drag between columns. You can change the number of points. You can change the title. We're going to cover a lot of subjects today, but all you need to know starting out is JavaScript and HTML. So what are we going to do? First, we're going to use Vite to create our project and install the necessary files. Then we'll create a task card and learn about JSX. Then we'll learn how React components work and use that to show multiple task cards. Then we'll have a quick crash course in Typescript and how to use it with React. Then we'll learn about arrays in React and use that knowledge to display our task cards in columns. Then we'll display icons based on task priority while learning some JSX tricks. Then we'll start adding interactivity. We'll use onClick and useState in order to change the points. Then we'll learn an important pattern that lets us change the points on the task objects themselves. Then we'll make the points follow the Fibonacci sequence. And then we'll learn how to use the input tag in React and use that to edit the title. Then we get to the real star of the show, which is clicking and dragging these tasks between columns. We'll combine a lot of what we learned earlier in the video with some new events specific to drag and drop. Finally, we'll create a fake server, and we'll learn how to populate data from that server, as well as make changes to the server with a put request. Now it's time to get everything set up. If you don't have Node installed already, then go ahead and download that. Once that's done, we can get started. So to create our React app, we're going to run npm create Vite, and we hit enter, and this is going to use create Vite, and it'll automatically install it as well. And so we're going to give it a name. And so let's call it React Intro Kanban. And then we're going to choose which framework we're using, React. And then we're going to go ahead and choose TypeScript plus SWC. SWC, if you're curious, stands for Speedy Web Compiler, and it is much faster than the alternative with, as far as I know, no downsides. So yes, let's use it. All right, so it's set up our scaffolding. We'll go ahead and cd into it, hit npm install, and npm run dev when that's ready. And with the npm install, I know that a lot of people love yarn and pnpm, and I love them as well. But once again, we're going to use the easiest to get started with tools here. All right, we hit npm run dev and open it up, and we can see our React app. It's running perfectly, and it's even interactive. Let's celebrate this milestone by creating a Git repository and adding everything and committing. In this section, we're going to remove all this default code, and we're going to install Tailwind CSS. However, I know this part can be a little tedious, so that's why I've created a GitHub branch. And in that GitHub branch, you can just clone the repository and switch to that branch, and it'll already be taken care of for you, and you can follow along from there. All right, so let's start by clearing out all this code. So here we'll clear everything out here and replace it all with just a div that says hello. And then we will remove all of this. So now we have the simplest possible app component, and we'll go ahead and remove all of this. And is that the only CSS file we have? No, we also have this, and remove that. And here, that looks all right. And we'll go ahead and remove these assets as well. We don't need a React or Vite logo. And then when we go back to our page, we see just hello right here in the corner. Excellent. Let's go ahead and do a commit here as well. Next, we're going to install Tailwind, and we're going to use the instructions from the site. And I believe they have something coming very soon where they're going to make this a lot simpler. So make sure to, if you're installing this, actually follow the instructions on the site and not just copy what I'm doing. Okay, so we've already created our Vite project and gone into it. Then we will install using npm, Tailwind, PostCSS, and AutoPrefixer. And these are just two libraries that Tailwind CSS needs in order to work. So we'll go ahead and install those. And then we'll run npx tailwind init -p. And so npx is something that will download npm commands and run them immediately. So there we go. So we have our Tailwind config and our PostCSS config files set up. Next, we'll want to go to that Tailwind config that we just created and change the content so it finds all of our template files. And so we'll go ahead and go to our Tailwind config and paste that in. There we go. And next we'll go ahead and go to our CSS and paste in these Tailwind. So these are the base styles. And here we go. And then finally we can get started using it. We can run npm run dev, and that'll get us started again. And then we can see it's still running. The padding that was previously there is gone because the Tailwind classes remove all of the default CSS styles. And so now we'll have to apply those manually. So let's go ahead and use a Tailwind style just to see if it's working. I'm going to explain what this is later on, but now you can see it is working. It did change, and we can change it to a different color as well. So now that we know that this is working well, let's go ahead and make our git commit. So now that we have Tailwind installed, you may be asking, how does it actually work? Let's explore. Okay, so we're starting here, super basic. The first thing you'll notice is that we have class name here, which is how we are styling things. Now, in a typical HTML file, you'll say class. However, in JSX, you have to say class name, and you'll notice that when it's compiled down here, it is back to being class. Next, you'll notice these class names. They are not ones that we've defined. They're ones that are defined by Tailwind. And you'll notice if you hover over them, you'll get the actual CSS. How you get this is you can go to your extensions in VS Code and get Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. This is super useful, and you're going to want to use this when you are working with Tailwind. This will also give you autocomplete. So if we do text, green 800 or 700, we can see a preview of what's available. One quirk of this, however, is that it's easy to accidentally lose the suggestions. So if that happens, you should delete the class name that you've started typing and retype it. This is not a full course in Tailwind, and most of the class names should be pretty self-explanatory when you see them. However, if there are any that are unclear, then I will explain how they work. Now, let's explore how React works. So here we have our app function. And so this function returns what looks like HTML. And so that's pretty interesting. However, this isn't quite HTML. This is something called JSX, and it has some special properties. So for example, let's say that we have this variable. We can put this variable in here, and it will display. However, it's not just strings that you can put in here. You can put in entire HTML elements as variables. So here, let's go ahead and put in that button. But we can go even further. We can put big red CSS, and we can put all of our CSS in a variable. And still working. And we can go even further. We can put the whole thing in a variable. And let's go ahead and just copy this. And we're just going to return the whole thing. And this is still working. And show that it has updated. Go ahead and put exclamation points here. There we go. So this is extremely powerful and also extremely dangerous if you use bad patterns, but we're not going to do that. We're only going to use good patterns. But let's explore a little bit more of the power. So we don't have to do this within the function. We could do it outside the function. And this works just fine. We could even do it in another file, which gets super powerful. And so the whole concept underlying this is that all of this is just JavaScript. It looks like HTML, but behind the scenes, React is looking at this as if it's JavaScript. And so that means we can bring the power of JavaScript into our templates. And so here's a simple version, const numThings equals 5. And so we can put numThings here and hello John Doe 5, but we could also do +1 right there, or ×2. You can do as much as you want here, and this is where it starts to get a little dangerous, a little messy, but use your judgment. You can also do stuff with if statements and ternaries. So let's say that we only want to show this whole thing if numThings is greater than 4. So we could do an and here, and it's showing, and move it to 4, and it disappears. We could also do a ternary. This is extremely common, and so the default here is null, but we could also do, yeah, that's a good default, not enough things. And so we do this to 4. Uh-oh. And we could, of course, also do a regular old if statement. So if numThings is greater than 4, we return whole thing. Otherwise, we return that. And that works just as well. Now that we've explored JSX and seen what we can do with it, let's go ahead and stash all our changes and actually get started with building our Kanban board. So let's first add a border here. And so you can see it, a light gray border wrapping around, and I'm fine with light gray. And then we'll go ahead and make the corners of it rounded. And you can see that happening right here. And let's go ahead and put some padding and some margin there. Now you can see it nicely separated from the edges of the pages. This may be something we do elsewhere in the app later, but for now it's fine to have it on the card itself. Okay, so let's give this a very light gray background, and then we can move on to the next part. So we'll go ahead and separate out now the title and the other parts. So here, we'll just put this in the title, and then for the rest of it, we'll put more stuff here. And you can see that is down below. And let's go ahead and put the text for Excel for just the title. And we may want to make this more clear that this is the title. So let's go ahead and name it that. There we go. And we'll go ahead and give it a more businessy title. We'll also add some other information. So we'll add the ID, and then we'll also add the points. And so we can put that here. And it'll show up like that. We could also make it so the points show up over here. How we're going to do that is using Flexbox. Flexbox is a way of specifying where you put your elements on the page. So we're going to give this the flex, and then we're going to separate ID and points into different elements. So what's happening right now is these two are just crammed together, bus 1 and 5. We could put a little gap in there by using gap 2, gap 4. However, we want this to be all the way on the right side. And so we could put it on the right side by saying justify end, but that puts both of them on the right side. We want business 1 to stay on the left. So we're going to do justify between. And so that puts space in between all the elements. And if we put another element in here, then it would be in the middle. Let's also make the spacing here a little bit better. So we're going to do px2, which means the padding only applies to the x dimension. And then on each of these, we're going to be doing py2. And now we have some nice separation here. That means that we could lower the size of this, and there's still clear separation. As a matter of fact, even with text base here, then it's still clear that this is the title and that these are the secondary elements. Maybe if we just give it a font semi-bold. There we go. And let's go ahead and make this text a little bit more gray. Yeah, now it's super clear that this is the title, these are secondary, even though the size is the same. We'll make further adjustments as we get more cards on the page, but this is pretty good for now. Let's go ahead and make this commit. Let's say that we want a second card. And so we're going to do it a silly way at first, and then work our way to the correct way. So we could copy and paste what we already had. And of course, if you save that, we have a big ol' error because when we return, we want to return a single element, not an array of elements. Now we can get around this by just wrapping everything in a div. And so that works. Of course, that can make your element tree really big. So you could also use a fragment. And there we go. So now it's right under the root. And so we've got our fragment here, and we have our 2 items. But this is a lot of repetition. And if we wanted to have 3 of these items, and then after that we change something, we'd have to change it in all 3 places. So let's go ahead and abstract this. So let's do a card, and we'll define card as this div, and then we'll just use it 3 times. And delete all of this. Great, we've got 3 cards, and show you that it really is doing that, we can just add a 4th. However, we want these to be different, not just using the same information. So we can actually not even just define this as a HTML, we can define it as a function. And the function can take a title, an ID, and points. And from here, we can just return the HTML, and it'll feed in the title, ID, and points. So here we can do the basic title, ID, and points, and let's go ahead and do that for everyone. Cool, so we have this function, and don't worry about these red squigglies. We're going to get to those in a second when we talk about Typescript. And we're feeding in 3 arguments, and we're getting a HTML element from that. So this is pretty cool. We can create a function that returns HTML and populates that HTML based on the arguments provided. However, we could abstract this even further. So this is defined outside of this function. So it could be defined anywhere, which means it could be defined in a completely different file. So we're going to start by creating taskcard.tsx, and we're just going to export this, and then we can import card from task card, and it's going to stay the exact same because it's the exact same thing we've been doing. We're just storing it in another file. And to demonstrate, we can put some exclamation points here, and yes, it is working. And so what we have right here is functionally equivalent to a React component. There's just a little bit of styling differences. So let's go ahead and make this into a quote-unquote real React component. So what we're going to want it to look like when we're done is it's going to be like this, and we're going to have it like that instead of like this. And so to make that happen, we're going to have to change a little bit here. So we're going to have a const card, and then we're going to capitalize it, and then export it as the default. And you don't actually have to capitalize it. These are just conventions. What isn't convention is that all of the arguments that we pass in need to be in the first parameter. So we'll just wrap it in curly braces like this. And then we will go ahead and change stuff here. So we are importing task card from task card, and do task card here. And we're going to comment all these out for now. And then this is working. And we can just put in the other ones, and they're working as well. And if we close this side panel, there you can see the whole thing. And so this is much more React-y, but it's doing the exact same thing as when we were just importing a function and giving that function arguments. This is a great place for a git commit, so let's go ahead and do that. You may have noticed for a while these red squiggly lines, and those are TypeScript validation errors. And so one surefire way to get rid of those is to rename this from TSX to JSX. Boom. The squigglies are gone. However, that gets rid of all the type safety. So let's go ahead and do a quick crash course in TypeScript and what it gives us. So here we can define a number as, well, actually, num as 1, and then num2 as 2, and num3 as num1 plus num2. And so that's great. We can put it here, boom, and we have 3 here. But what if we change this to the string 1? Now we have 12 because we have 1, the string, plus 2, which is converted into a string, and they're concatenated together. Now let's do this again with TypeScript. So here, num, we're going to define it as a number. Num2, we're also going to define as a number. And then num3, because it's num1 plus num2, is automatically defined as a number. So we don't have to do an explicit type. It'll have an implicit type of number. And then if we change this to be a string, you'll notice this red squiggly says type string is not assignable to type number. And so it tells us, hey, something could go wrong here. This is, of course, a super simple example, and it would be kind of silly to do it right here. All the context is right here. However, the larger your app is, the more spread out the context is. And TypeScript can help you carry those type rules, that context, throughout your app. So let's go ahead and add some types here. So title is a string, and notice there's an issue here. That's because objects, and this is a little inconvenient. You can't define them like normal types. You have to define them in a second object, a type object after here. So colon and then this. You can't just do a colon and string after the name here. All right, so we have this, and of course we need to remove num3. And so now we know it requires a title, an ID, and points. And here, let's see what happens if we try to remove the title. Now it says, hey, there really should be a title. So property title is missing in this type. And so this is really great when you are using other people's components or components you wrote a long time ago and trying to remember what the required arguments are. Of course, let's say that you want it so you don't have to have points assigned yet. Right now, this will cause an error. And you can't just remove the points here. What we can do is make it so it's optional by doing a question mark. And there we go. Now the type error went away. Some of them have points, others don't, and they all display just fine. Now let's do a little more abstraction. We have the idea of a task, and that is title, ID, and points. And so we could define a task like this. And then we could get the properties off that object to feed into the component. And this is great, but we could also just feed the task in directly. And I'm going to go ahead and comment these out. And you'll notice, of course, that this is causing a TypeScript error because it doesn't expect a task with a title, ID, and points. It expects the title, ID, and points directly. However, we could easily change that. So here, we should have a task, and then the task has these properties. Cool, this is great. And of course here we need to put in a task, task.id, and task.points. And then we can see that the TypeScript is working. However, this idea of a task doesn't just live in this argument. Let's see what happens if we remove ID. So here, it shows up down here as the error. And if you read this, you can tell, okay, trace it back here, so the error's up here. It would be nice if we could define it so the error showed up here. And we can. There we go, we remove the ID, and now the error shows up here, where the error has actually been made. However, it would be nice if we could abstract this. So this and this are the same thing because they're both coming from the idea of a task. And that's where we get types. And so let's go ahead and create a type of task. And so this is a custom type, and we can say, okay, this task is a task. And of course, if we add in the ID again, now it's happy. And we can also say, all right, this is going to be a task. And let's go ahead and export it from here. This is not where you should put your types. Don't worry, we'll fix it soon. Okay, here we go. And now it's happy. And we have one version of task, and no matter where we use it, we know it will have a title and an ID and maybe some points. Also note that if we add more here, it gives an error here because it says, hey, that's not something that goes on a task. Whereas if we did not have this defined, then it would be fine, even if we have it defined here. Okay, I hope that was understandable and useful. If not, that's okay. You can take as much time as you need to understand TypeScript. As your apps get bigger and your teams get bigger, it's going to be super useful. But for now, use as much or as little as you need. Before we move on to the next section, let's go ahead and put the custom task type in its own file. And we'll call this data tasks. And we'll make this a TypeScript file. And for now, it's just going to export the task type. And so here we will import task from there. And here we will also import task from the same spot. Let's go ahead and make this commit. And there we go. Okay, before we go any further, we need a little bit more organization in our folders here. So it's not a big deal right now how we have it, but we're going to move it into something a bit more standard. So first we're going to make a components folder, and then we're going to put the task card in there. And then we are going to rename it like that. And so this is much more standard. Once again, React gives you a lot of freedom, and you can do a ton with that freedom, and it won't stop you. It'll just be confusing to other React devs. So components is one of the standard folders, and utils is one of the others. And we're going to go ahead and put data tasks into utils. If we had a larger project, then we might want to break it up even further, put this into data or types type folder. But utils is good enough for a small project. Go ahead and add this and make the commit. Okay, back to our app. So right now we are only having one task, and we could have a task 2, which is just going to have the same information that we were feeding in to our task card, and same with task 3. So we're going to just finish this out, get all 4 tasks, and then we can, instead of here, we can just have a task card with task 2, a task card with task 3, and a task card with task 4. However, these are hard-coded, and it works great for now when they don't change and when we are defining them in our app component. But we're going to want to get these from a server eventually. So what we're going to do is, instead of defining these as 4 separate tasks, we're going to create a tasks array. And here we are, we've skipped the end, we have our tasks array. And we're going to go ahead and give it a type. So it's a type of task, but then it has this symbol after it. And so that means it is an array of tasks. You could also say this. That means the same thing. We've got these tasks. Now, here in our HTML, we need to loop through them. And fortunately, that is very easy with JSX if you understand JavaScript. So we have our tasks array, and we can just call map. And then in the function body of map, we just call more HTML. So we call task card there, and it's working. Next, we'll do a little reorganization. So we're going to take this tasks array, and we're going to go ahead and put that in data tasks. And the only thing we have to change is we're going to export it from here and then import it from here. And we can reuse the import statement, but instead of having the task type, we're just going to have the tasks array. And there we have it, nice and cleaned up. Let's go ahead and use this as a checkpoint so we can add a commit to our repository. So now we've got our array of tasks, but a Kanban board isn't just an array of tasks. It is several columns, each with a different status. So let's go ahead and put that into our data. So here we'll have a status, and we could just say that it's a string. However, there's only going to be 3 available statuses. Those will be to do, in progress, and done. And so what that means is that if we have a status here of to do, then now this is great. But if we misspell it, then now we have an error. So this is great. Typescript is going to make sure that we don't ever misspell or put in something that we don't mean to. I've gone ahead and pasted in more data. So you can see that we have 8 different items. Next, we're going to take those items and we're going to filter them by each of the types of status that we can have. So we're going to have a column for to do, a column for in progress, and a column for done. We're going to start by doing it the naive way. So we're going to have a to do tasks, and we're going to filter it by the status of to do, and we're going to repeat for all 3 different statuses. And we're going to make that into an array later, but for now, let's just do it this way. And so we're going to have to do tasks. We're going to loop through those, and those are the 4 tasks with to do. And we'll go ahead and put that here, and in progress, we'll repeat that. And for done, we'll repeat that. And there we go. Of course, this styling is not very good and not very useful. Let's go ahead and turn these into actual columns. So the first thing we'll do is make this an actual div, and we'll make it a flex box with a Y divider, and we'll see what that does in a second. And then each of these, we will wrap in a div. So if we don't do that, you see it has this, then it's, yeah, not quite how we want, but this first one that we do wrap is working correctly. And now here it is. And I'm going to go ahead and make the text in here a little smaller and give this a little more room so it can breathe. And so that'll make the code slightly harder to see, but we're getting to where we need this. Okay, this is a little better. If you're watching on mobile, I hope that this still works for you. So, like I said before, this is the naive way of doing things. However, what if we add a new type of status? Are we going to copy-paste? No, of course we don't want to copy-paste code, especially as this gets more complex, and it will, especially as we are dragging between columns. So we want to create an array that has our statuses, and then loop through that array. So we're going to go ahead and have our statuses, and there we go. And these will have a type of status array. Oh, right, and we want our status type, which is this, and so we can say our status is of type status. There we go. Let's go ahead and export this so we can import it here. So type status, actually no, we want statuses. There we go. And so we will loop through the statuses and make that columns. So statuses.map, and for each of them, we will have our tasks in the column and return. I love Copilot. Right, so we're filtering, so only if the status in that task matches the status from the column. And by the way, the reason that Copilot was able to do this so accurately is because I already had this written. It'll read what you have in that file, as well as all the other knowledge it has. So the better you've named stuff and the better you've structured your code, the better results it's going to give you. Anyways, so let's go ahead and delete that. And now what we're going to do is we are going to map through all the columns. And in each of these, we're going to have a div here. And why is it not liking things? And this is giving an error because we can call it as return. And there we go, that error is gone. We could also do a shortcut here. So we can do parentheses here, and that's the same thing as returning whatever's in there. There we go. And of course we do column.tasks, and we'll loop through there. Now all of these say to do, but we will make this column.status, or we could call it title. There we go. So let's do a quick review of what we've done. So we created a columns array from the statuses array and filtered those tasks and gave it a title. Then we looped through those columns, and we have this parentheses and this closing parentheses, which is the same thing as doing this and then returning the HTML, well, JSX. And then for each of those, we loop through the columns. So this is pretty good. This is, for what we're doing, the amount we're doing, it's surprisingly easy to read. And so let's go ahead and make it look better over here. So first thing we'll do, I said divide Y, it's actually divide X. And there we go, that puts a nice little line there. Next, we want each of these to be the same width. So let's go ahead to our task card and define that. Go ahead and give it a width of, let's try 60. All right, so that goes a little beyond our super abbreviated screen, but that's okay. Maybe we'll try 48. We'll go with 50 something. Yeah, let's go with 52. All right, that looks pretty good. Maybe 56. Okay. Enough messing around there. That's not the main point of things. And there's plenty of separation here now that we've got them shorter. So we can move this from font semi-bold to font base. And here we can go ahead and make it text small. There we go. This is looking very good. And we'll remove these exclamation points. All right, not bad. Okay, and let's go ahead and make the text gray. All right, so by reducing how much each of these elements stand out, we've kept a similar difference between the title and here, but it doesn't really, there's not as many things reaching out to grab your attention, which is really good. So everything's more subtle because we just have so many of them on screen. However, we do want this to reach out and grab our attention more. We'll actually make an H2 because there's so many of them. And because we're using Tailwind, it doesn't have the default H2. So we're going to need to give it a text 3XL. Okay, not bad. We'll do padding 2. Okay, and we're going to want to capitalize it. Good. And let's go ahead and do a font bold and text gray 700. See how that does. Maybe 600. 500. There we go. Yeah, that looks nice. So I think this looks pretty good. It won't win any design awards, but it's significantly better than what we started with, and it's nice and clean. So let's move on to the next task. We'll go ahead and make a checkpoint here. There we go. The next thing we're going to do is add a piece of information that's really important to a Kanban board, and that is the priority. And not only are we going to add that status, we're going to make a little icon that changes depending on what the priority is, and it'll go right here. All right, so first we're going to go here and we're going to have below the status, we're going to have priority. And the priority, you know what? Let's just do a type like we did for status. And we're going to have it as low, medium, and high. And just like the status, we're going to export priorities. There we go. And actually don't think we'll be using that, but it's, you know, nice to have. All right, and let's go ahead and just put priorities on all of them. All right, I've updated everything so that all of these tasks have a priority. And I just assigned the priorities randomly. This does not reflect how I think of these business tasks. All right, so let's go ahead and put it in a very basic way. we'll just put task.priority. There we go. It has high, medium, or low. And here we'll have a, go ahead and do flex and gap 2. Just do a little bit of separation. And of course that will require a div around each of these. Okay, there we go. But we don't want to show it as this. We want to show an icon. And so what we'll do is we'll have, a down icon if it's a low priority, an up icon if it's high priority, and an equals icon like that if it's a medium priority. So we're going to get those SVGs in a second. But first, let's look at the logic on how we do this. So we'll say if our task.priority is equal to high, then, oh, nice, it has a little thing here. This is not exactly the one we want, but we'll take it for now. And if the task.priority is equal to medium, well, low, okay, here we go. And here you can see we have something different for each of the priorities. And so this works just like JavaScript. So if you read through it, so if this is true, then it will display this. Or more precisely, this is an expression, and if this is false, then it just returns false for this entire thing. If this is true, then it returns this. And some people much prefer doing this, and that's fine. However, there is one thing we cannot do in here, and that is an actual if statement. They just really don't like that. Because JSX, the pitch is that you can use JavaScript, any JavaScript you want in here, but it's not actually true. It's just mostly true. So yeah, don't do an if statement. This and or this ternary will work fine. So now that we know how this works, let's go ahead and generate some better icons for this. So let's go ahead and say const low priority icon. And here it has V because it sees that's what we have here. However, we want something more visually appealing. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in this SVG. And so there we have it. It looks nice. It's a light blue. Fantastic. And we're going to go ahead and do one for the medium priority icon. And let's see if that is going to generate what we want. And no, it does not. So I'll go ahead and paste in the one I created as well. I've been using a lot of AI in my workflow lately. However, some of it is, more reliable than others. And the ones that I'm pasting in now actually were AI generated. However, I cannot figure out how to regenerate them. I was prompting for this video and it just wasn't working. So very useful, very finicky as far as a workflow. Anyways, now we see these priority icons and we have these SVG variables. And we'll go ahead and delete that so we just see the icons. And if we wanted to reuse these, then we would go ahead and put them in a different file, maybe 3 different files. However, since we're just going to be using them in these cards, we can leave them here for now. And split them off if we want to reuse them, or if the amount of code in this file gets to be too much. So this is a perfect checkpoint, so let's go ahead and make a git commit, and we'll call it priority icons. So now that we have our columns looking good, it's time to add some interactivity. So there'll be 3 things that we're adding. First, we will make it so we can change the number of points. Then we'll make it so we can edit the title. And finally, we'll make it so that we can change the status. We'll start by making it so we can change the number of points. And so we'll add a button here, and we will go ahead and give it a plus sign. So save it. See, we see a little plus there, and it looks clickable. And we're going to make it so it does something on click. And then we can put a function here, and in this function we'll just console log hello. So this is our hello world first interactivity. All right, fantastic. We can also get the event, and we will log that out. So next what we want to do is actually change the number of points that we're displaying. So we could do the super naive thing. I mean, I say we could. This actually will not work. So we'll just do plus equals 1 here. And the issue here is, okay, possibly undefined. We'll just ignore that. But here, all right, so we're clicking, nothing is happening. And then I went and saved here, and now it's at 17. So we are actually increasing the number on task.points. So we'll do this again. I'll click another couple times, go here, hit save. It's up again, but it only changed when I saved over here. And the reason is that we are not updating this component whenever we hit click. However, there is a way around that, and that is through useState. So here we will useState, and we will set the default as task.points, and we'll go ahead and import from React the useState. That's what this looks like. And now here we can put in the points here, and we will set points here as the current points plus 1. Let's go ahead and give that a try, and you can see that it is now updating. And so useState, how it works is you feed it in a default value, and then you have the current value and a way to change the current value. And you can actually call this anything you want. You can call this say hello, and put this as say hello, and then it still works, but of course that would be extremely silly. The convention is to have it as X and then set X. And if you diverge from that convention, it will be very surprising to everyone else in your code base. They will be very confused. This is, once again, a case of React giving you a lot of flexibility and giving you lots of ways to shoot yourself in the foot, as well as do amazing things. All right, so here we have set points to be points plus 1, and that is fantastic. Let's go ahead and make a second button with a minus sign, and it sets points to -1. And there we go. And let's go ahead and get some spacing in here. That's not bad. We need to, so item center, I think is what we need. There, good. That moved our numbers down a little bit. And here on these numbers, let's go ahead and set them to font bold, so they stand out a little more, and I think that'll be good. Yeah, this is decent styling. However, there are some issues that remain. So the first is that this is possibly undefined, points is. So let's go ahead and add a default of 0. Because remember, when we defined task.points, points was the only one that we created that was optional. All right, so we have 0 here as a default, so that makes that go away. There are some optional warnings here. So, yeah, because we never actually used the event. And there we go. We're good on that front. The bigger issue is that, yes, we can change this here, but this is happening only in the component, in points right here. It's not actually changing task.points. And so if we want to use the point value elsewhere, it's going to be the original one. So Let's say for each of these columns, we want to display the total number of points in the columns. We would need to find some way to get these point changes up and into the actual task.points so that then it could be calculated here outside of this component. To do that, we're going to introduce some new data flow concepts. So our goal is to create a number here, which is the total number of points, and to have it update whenever we change the points in the individual tasks. And so we'll start off with the easier version of this, which is to have it based on the initial. So we'll start off with the most naive way of doing things. So here where we have the hey, we're just going to try to calculate the total number of points. And so column.tasks. Let's go ahead and do a reduce. And there we go. And let's go ahead and make it so it's okay if task.points is not created. Cool. And it looks like we have a good answer here. So this is 29 and this is 21. But if we update this, it is not updating. This is, of course, expected because this update is on the useState points, which is only defined in the task card. So we need to find a way to update task.points. And like we saw in the previous section, if we just say task.points plus equal 1, then that's not going to work. So what we need to do is to get rid of this local useState and basically say to the parent component, hey, you need to update the task points, and then give us back the updated task. And to update the task points, we're going to actually pass in the entire task, and then the new number of points, and then we're not going to return anything. And we put that up here as well. And so now so let's go ahead and put in points here as task.points or 0 so that it's going to make it easier because this requires a number and task has an optional number of points. So this is very important, this or 0 here. And now, instead of calling set points, we're just going to call update task points and pass in the task as well as the new number of points. And now this is the responsibility of the parent component. You can see we have a Typescript error because we have not yet defined what update task points is here. So let's go ahead and first we're going to bring this onto a new line so that we can give ourselves a little more space. And we're going to do this on a new line here and update task points. Here, we are not actually going to define this in line. We're going to define it update task points up here. Okay, so we have a task, which is of task type, and points, which is a number. And now we need to figure out how to actually make this change. And to do that, we're going to use useState again. And now it's going to be for tasks. And we're going to want to rename this to initial tasks so that we are not overloading the tasks term. Cool. Right, we need as initial tasks. All right, cool. And spelling. There we go. And we need to import useState. And there we go. So the tasks are showing up. And here in update task points, what we're going to do is we're going to get updated tasks by mapping through our tasks. And if the ID is matching, we are going to return the task, but with the updated points. And otherwise, we are going to just return the task without any updates. And personally, I like this style better because it's clear that it's an else and that there's a return. And then we set tasks with the updated tasks. And so let's go ahead and see that it is working. Excellent. Let's clean up our code a little bit. And so here, I already changed the code style a little bit, but oh yeah, that's way better. That feels much cleaner to me. All right, still working. And now let's go ahead and make this display a little better. But first, let's go back and review how this data is flowing. So we're getting tasks from data tasks, and these are static, right? And then we are renaming it to initial tasks. So we have to do this because we are exporting a const of tasks, but we're importing it as initial tasks. Then we're using that in useState, and this is the initial value. And so we have the tasks array and then set tasks to change it. And then we have the updateTask points function, which takes in a task and a number of new points. We map through the tasks to get our updated tasks. And if the ID matches, then we update the points. Otherwise, we return the task. So that means basically we are updating one of the tasks, leaving the rest of the tasks alone, and then using set tasks to update that for React. And then we are feeding those tasks to the columns array, which is being defined here. And yes, it updates. Whenever you call set tasks here, what it does is it's going to rerun everything. That's how React works. So it reruns this as a function, basically, because it is a function. And that means we get a new value for columns, and each of those columns has a new value for the tasks. And so we get the updated points total, as well as getting it passed down to the task cards themselves. Okay, now let's go ahead and make this look a little better. So this is the code that's defining it. And so we can, let's go ahead and put it right here and larger in the same style as this H2. And so we are going to do a flex box. So flex justify between, and these are our two. And we've got it here. Let's go ahead and bring our text 3XL and P2 up here, as well as our font bold and text gray 500. So yeah, that's bringing almost everything except it being an H2. And there we go. That's looking good. This is a great checkpoint, so let's go ahead and make a git commit. All right, so the points are great, kind of, except we can have negative points, and we can have things that have 30 points, and that's not really what we want in a Kanban board. We want between 0 and, depending on how you do it, let's say 13 for a Fibonacci sequence. What we need to do is set some limits so that if we try to click the button and go negative or go over 13, it's not going to work. And then later, we're going to try to make it so we have it in the Fibonacci sequence, not with, going up from 5 to 6, but if we go hit plus from 5, it'll go directly to 8. So we'll start with the easy one, making sure it doesn't ever go below 0. So we're going to create a new function, which will be update points. And we're just going to take in the new points that we want. And the easiest thing is there, and we're only going to do that if points is greater than 0. So if points is less than 0, we return. So this is called a guard clause. And so it's guarding the rest of the function. And if it doesn't meet the requirements, it gets turned away. All right, so if it's 0 or above, then we can update the task points. So let's go ahead and use this here, and then try it out. And of course, we will not be passing in a task, just be passing in the points. All right, so we hit minus here, and nice. It will only go down to 0 and not below. Now, on the other end, if we want to guard against going above 13, that's also easy. If points greater than 13, then we return. And see, now we can't get it to go up any further here, and it'll stop at 13 here. Making it do the Fibonacci sequence is a little more difficult. So the first important thing is that we're not going to pass in a number. We're going to pass whether we want to go up or down. And so we'll just pass in direction, and it can be up or down. And so this in TypeScript means or. You can remember it because this in JavaScript means or, single one, in TypeScript is or. All right, and so here, this no longer makes sense. What we're going to do is get a Fibonacci sequence and cut it off at 13. And then we're going to find the current index based on the points here. And then we're going to make the next index. So if it's up, it goes +1. If it's down, it goes -1. All right, and so now we're going to make our new points, fib next, and then this could be a number or it could be null. So if we're going out of bounds, then it's not going to be anything. And so what we're going to do is if new points exists, then we're going to update task points with the new points. Cool, let's go ahead and try this out. So we hit up, and that is not working as expected because we forgot to change this down here. We're still giving it a number. So here, this goes down, and this goes up. Now let's try it. There we go. This is working fantastic. This is a great checkpoint, so we'll create a git commit and then move on to the next task. The next interaction we'll build is making it so we can edit the titles. So we'll click on a title, and that'll make it so that we can start editing it. And then when we click away or tap away, it will stop editing it. So we're going to start by using a useState in the task card. And this is saying whether we're editing it or not. And then once we're done editing it, then we're going to send back to update on the task itself using another function similar to update task points. But for now, let's toggle between the editing states. So this is what it's like when we are not editing it. However, we need to do something different when we are editing it. So when editing, we'll just put in editing for now. And when not editing, we're gonna do this. Okay, so we're going to, well, clicking doesn't do anything yet. We need to make it so that when we click on here, we will set is editing to true. And so now when we click on here, it moves it to editing. And of course, that's not the exact thing that we want to happen. We want it to actually have an input. So let's go ahead and first let's move this class name up a level. All right, so this styling is now up a level. And that'll make the editing display a little better, Yeah, so it's now in line. Very nice. And now we turn this editing div into an input. And so this is actually a fairly good default. And so what's happening is it's going to autofocus. So when we click here, we gotta save it. Click here and it will automatically focus right here at the end. Class name, it's with full, it's taking up the entire one. When we blur, it sets editing title to false, and the value is set to the task title. The only problem is the onChange. OnChange is going to be called whenever we add or remove a letter in the input box. So whenever we type a key, basically, or remove one with delete, which is a problem because we are not actually updating the task points. We want to update task title. And so this will, there we go. Yeah, we're going to feed it the task and the e.target.value, which is the new value of the input. So we're going to demonstrate that in just a second. But first, we need to actually define update task title. And it's going to be very similar to update task points. So we're going to go ahead and make it here so we can pass it down. All right, there we go. Very nice. And here we're going to make update task title. And we're making this up, but we will define it here. So const update task title, and it's actually going to be extremely similar to update task points. All right, so here we go. And this is working. We blur, and there we go. And so at this point, you may be looking at update task points and update task title and thinking, those look pretty similar. I bet we could have a third function called update task. And if we just give it the task, the new task that is, then we can map through all the old tasks and replace just that one, and then set tasks. And let's go ahead and fix some syntax errors, and now it should work. So let's go ahead and call update task here, and there we go. And we can call update task here in a very similar way. And what that means is we don't actually have to pass down these two separate functions to task card. We can just pass down the generic update task. Of course, we will want to change the Typescript here, as well as how we actually handle things. So we will be getting update task and defining it here, removing those. And now when we call update task points, we will just do this. So here we are passing the updated task, and then we'll use update task directly. And then instead of calling update task title, we can, we're going to have to call update task, and here, there we go. That should work. Some people may want to define a separate update task title up here, which then calls update task. That's more of a preference thing. And then we'll go ahead and see that both of these are working. Then in our app function, we can delete everything except task and update task. And that goes for our function definitions up here. And once again, our interaction is looking good. This is a great checkpoint, so we're going to make a git commit. Now we're ready for our third piece of interactivity, which is drag and drop. So we want to be able to drag a card from one column to another. There are quite a few libraries that help you with this. However, the browser primitives have gotten good enough that I think we can do it without any separate libraries. So first step, we're going to declare that this element, our task card, is draggable. So now when we drag, we see this behavior. Very nice. And of course, we haven't set up any other behavior, so it'll just go back there when we drop it. So this is set it as draggable, and now we have a series of events that we'll need to set. The first being onDragStart. So onDragStart is called when you start dragging it. And the key thing we're going to do here is set e.dataTransfer.setData. And we're going to make it so that we are passing the task ID. So we're going to set ID as the task ID. And what that is going to do is when we drop, we're going to be able to see what has been dragged and use that in order to move that task. Or more precisely, change the status property on that task, and then it will automatically move columns. Speaking of columns, that's where we're going to set the onDrop property. So here, it will be right here. And we're going to set onDrop. And we're going to have an event. And we are going to call handleDrop, which first we're going to feed it this and the column.status. So we're passing the event and the column.status. And thank you, Typescript, for reminding us that we changed this to title. And then we need to define handleDrop. And so in handleDrop, what we're going to do is we will, prevent default. Then we're going to get the ID from data transfer, where we set it previously. And then we will find the correct task. And then if we can find that task, we are going to update the task with the new status. And let's see. Yes, so this is a interesting TypeScript thing. First, we're going to fix the TypeScript in a second. But before that, we're going to actually show this working. Except it's not working, and that's because we need to set onDragOver and then prevent the default. And now it will actually work. Excellent. And yeah, this is one of the reasons why there are still drag and drop libraries, even though the browser primitives are pretty good. Okay, so let's fix this status. So type string is not assignable to type status. So here, we'll just make this a status type and import that, and now it should work. So remember, with our types, we have status, and it could be any of these 3 different strings. But if it's any other string, then it's not going to be valid. And so because we defined this as a string, we know based on how we call handleDrop that it is going to be a status, but we hadn't told TypeScript that. And so we could theoretically call this from somewhere else, where we just pass in a random string, which is not good. So this fixes that. So our drag and drop is working, and this is great, but we don't have the hover effect. And that is because we're going to need to add some other events beyond just the onDrop and onDragStart. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and save our progress. All right, so our goal is to highlight whatever we're hovering over. So we're going to add a third event on this div. So we have onDrop and onDragOver. We're going to add onDragEnter. And onDragEnter, we're going to call something called, easily enough, handle drag enter, which we're going to specify and pass it the current column's status, which we have reassigned a title, which, I'm thinking was maybe not the best idea. So let's go ahead and fix that. Okay. Yeah, that is a little better. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to define onDragEnter. We're going to bring in a status. And first, let's go ahead and just do console log. See that it's working. So yep, we're in done, now in progress, now in to do. And so now with this information, what we're going to do is we're going to set a currently hovering over. Maybe that's a little verbose, but whatever. All right, and the default is null, and it can be null or a status. And we are going to set currently is hovering over to that status. And then what we're going to do is we want to highlight everything below here. So we're going to create a new div here, and we're going to define class name, but it's going to be a variable. And it's going to be full height, and then if currently hovering over is equal to that column's status, then we're going to turn that background just a little bit gray. And we need to close out these divs and do a closing version of that. And now this should work. All right, so it is not working. And the issue is that Copilot entered an extra curly brace here. Fun. Anyways, we drag and it's working. But we do have a problem. When we drop, it still stays highlighted. So we're going to update handle drop so that no matter what, it's going to set currently hovering over to null. And now, there we go. So let's review our drag and drop. In the task card, we set the card as draggable, and then we set the onDragStart event, and we call data transfer and set the ID to the task's ID. And then in the column, so each of these is a column, then we call onDragOver to prevent the default. That's important because otherwise onDrop doesn't work. And onDrop, we feed that to handle drop, the event, and the column status. And we, of course, prevent the default, and then we get the ID of the task that's being dragged from the event data transfer. And then we find the task from our task list that matches the ID. Then we update that task with the new status. And of course, we also set currently hovering over to null, which means that the highlighting will go away. And the highlighting is whenever currently hovering over is equal to the column status, then it will apply a background gray of 200. And we set the currently hovering over whenever we drag enter. And so that is how it works. There's quite a few moving parts, but once you get a handle on them, then it's pretty easy. Let's go ahead and save our progress, and then tackle the final challenge for today. So we've got this working, fantastic. However, we have a problem. We can make all the changes that we want, but if we restart, then the changes all get reset. Now, we're not going to create a full-on server today. However, we are going to fake a server and then make calls as if we are calling a real server. And then, when you do create a server, you can just switch it out. You can call a different endpoint as long as the API signature is the same. To do that, we're going to use JSON Server, and it's super easy to set up. So first, we're going to install JSON Server globally. And then once that's installed, we're going to run JSON Server and have it watch db.json. So what it does here is it is creating a db.json with some default data, and then it's trying to run it on localhost 3000, but I have another project running there. So let me go shut that down real quick. Okay, let's try this again. Fantastic, it's working. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this is giving us. So we're going to go to localhost 3000 posts. So here we have an array of posts, and we do /1, and then it's a single post, and this is being fed from db.json. And so if we wanted to add a second post, then that's super easy. And right, in JSON you have to have the everything is a string, all the keys. We'll just do it 2. And then here, now we have 2 showing up. And so the obvious application here is we're going to do this for tasks. And fortunately, we have an array of tasks just sitting around in task data or data tasks. All right, so we're just going to take this array and cut this and paste it in here. All right, so we're going to have to do some magic to make this JSON. So what we're going to want to do is wrap all of these keys in double quotes and remove the single quotes and put those in double quotes as well. And so I'm noticing a pattern here. This may not be the most efficient way to do it, but it is moderately efficient. And so that's good enough. So here we wrap these in the single double quotes, and then we are about to destroy the numbers, but that'll be fine. Okay, cool. So this is mostly done. Then off screen, we'll go ahead and clean things up. So now we have our DB JSON with the data that was once in data tasks. And we can go ahead and do /tasks, and there we have it. We have all of the tasks, and we can do /business3, and that'll return just that individual one. So this is a RESTful server. That means we can also do put, post, and patch to update this data, which we will do later in this section. However, first there is a problem. We do not have tasks here. This is now an empty array. We're going to have to figure out how to pull it from the API. So let's go ahead and actually delete this, and Typescript is alerting us that this task is not here anymore. And so the initial tasks here is going to be an empty array, and we're going to have to find a way to call set tasks with what we're getting from the API. So what we're going to do here is we're going to call fetch, and we're going to call it to localhost 3000 /tasks, and we're going to go ahead and hard code it for now. You, of course, do not want to hard code a localhost in a production application, but this is just showing you how you can talk to a server. And then we're going to turn that into data we can use, and then we're just going to call set tasks on that data. And there we go. There is our data. And we can, of course, make the change. Oh, we cannot make the changes. And do you want to know why? So let's go ahead and dig into what's happening here. We're going to log that we are setting the tasks, and we're going to see that every time we set the tasks. And let's reload this, and we're setting the tasks hundreds of times per second. That is not super efficient. And then, of course, eventually arrows out because of resource limits. All right, so what is happening here? So when we call set tasks, we are redefining what tasks is. And that means that we need to recalculate the columns, and we need to recalculate how the columns are displayed. Essentially, we need to rerun this function. And so then we rerun the function, and then we fetch the tasks again, and then we set the tasks, and then we rerun the function again, and so on and so forth. And to get around that, we're going to use useEffect. And so we're going to see it in action and then see how it works. So here we have an empty array as the second argument, and the first argument is a function that will hold our fetch. All right, so we're going to reload, and there we go. It only runs this twice. So you may be wondering, why does it run it twice? It should be running it once, right? The answer is, if you go to main.tsx, we are running this in strict mode. So if you remove strict mode, you'll see it only runs once. And what strict mode is doing is it's running it twice to try to find accidental side effects in your render method. Anyways, back to useEffect. So we have our function, and then we have the dependencies. And this is an empty array. If we say set the dependency as tasks, then we're back to the old mess. And that's because, yeah, it's updating every time the tasks change, which is in that function, infinite loop. However, if we set it as, say, currently hovering over, so let's move this up, and then we set this as the dependency, and see, it is running every time the currently hovering over changes. So that's useEffect. That is how to keep your React app from going into an infinite loop. Now let's get back to using our server. So now when we update a task, we also want to update that task on the server. So let's go ahead and we're going to call fetch again. This time we're going to use the put method and attach some headers to it. And then the body is going to be the task. And remember, this is the new version of the task. So let's go ahead and see that. Okay, so this is changing here, and let's reload, and you'll see that it is saved. And if you go to db.json, go to evaluate business performance, that is number 8, then it has been changed to 13 points here. And if we change it here, it changes right here in the file. That's also true if we move columns and we reload, and there we are. Let's go ahead and make our final save for the day. And now we are done. That is, we are done with this particular project, but there's a ton more you could add, and there's a ton more you can learn about React. Drop me a comment below telling me what you want to learn next.